If you're feeling resentful that you're growing and your partner isn't stepping up, then this is the episode for you. Today, we talk to a marriage coach about how to inspire your partner to step up and inspire them to grow without nagging or trying to change them. This is an episode you don't want to miss right after this. What is mindset? Our mindset is based on what we believe, and anything we believe in, we put into motion. I have spent my life putting the mindset of perseverance into motion, and now I am here today to share my journey along with others whose mindsets have changed the course of their lives. Hi, I'm mindset coach Lorraine Lindsey, and I believe that if you can change your mind, you have the power to change your life. So are you ready? Welcome back to another episode of the Lorraine Lindsey podcast. This episode is going to set us straight with relationships, with marriages, with long-term partnerships. So before we get into the topic today, I do invite you to hit the subscription button, give us a thumbs up, and make sure as you're watching this, send us your comments. I absolutely love hearing the feedback. Here on my podcast, I'm all about mindset, and I truly believe that if you can change your mind, you have the power to change your life. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest for today. Hello there.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. I'm going to read a little bit of your bio, talk about who you are, and then we're going to get into it because I have so many questions for you. And I'm so happy because I actually think this is the first time we've touched on this topic as far as it pertains to marriage and long-term relationships. So let me introduce Julie real quick. Julie is a marriage coach who helps heart-led women entrepreneurs inspire their husbands to lead so they can build a legacy of impact and income on a strong foundation of support and love at home. But before discovering her purpose as a marriage coach, she worked in corporate as an executive in the investment world. Julie realized her soul's purpose was to be a woman-centered marriage coach when she saved her marriage from being on the brink of divorce to being obsessed with each other, even after 16 years together. As a certified NLP coach, she deconstructs her process into her signature framework, the Inspire Him method. She has coached many women who have completely transformed their marriage, some of them even becoming thriving business partners with their husbands. Oh, this is so good. Let me tell you, we met at an event. It was an amazing event, and then you stood up and spoke, and then I was like, I got to have her on the show because, again, I don't think that I've ever really tapped in to a relationship and keeping it and helping it to grow. We're always talking about when the relationship's falling apart. So I thought, gosh, she's doing it. She's doing the thing that we all want. Because I think that when we have long-term relationships, whether we're married or we're just in a union together for a long time, there is inevitably going to be really bad rough patches that sometimes you feel like it's so bad you're not sure how to dig yourself out of it. Particularly when you're a high-achieving woman, when you're an entrepreneur, and you're out there trying to do life, and then you come home and life is starting to fall apart. So give us a little something right off the bat, and then we'll get into some of the questions that I have for you today.
Sure. Well, maybe I'll start with sharing a story on how I kind of got into this and how I started to realize that I have so much more power in my relationship than I ever thought. So I was your typical high-achieving alpha female working in corporate, climbing the corporate ladder, had all the beautiful things, the income, the title, the salary, the Louboutins, the Chanels, all the things. Everything looked great on the outside. But inside my home, we were at each other's throats. I mean, not every day, but if we weren't at each other's throats, we were disconnected. There were times where I felt so resentful of my husband because he wasn't stepping up the way that I needed him to. He wasn't the person that I needed him to be for me. And so being even in the same room was difficult. And so I was in this place where I was on the brink of divorce multiple times. But this very last time I remember, I thankfully was working with a coach. And we weren't actually working on my relationship. It was on self-love. But she's heard me complain about my marriage before. And I'm like, God, I can't anymore. And I can't stay and I can't go and I can't leave for all these reasons. And she checked me. She said, Julie, you're acting like you don't have a choice, but no one's holding a gun to your head. you do have a choice. You can leave or you can stay. You just don't like the consequences of either choice.
That's so deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, damn, you're right. And I think that was a moment that I went from being a princess, very entitled, very, complaining about my husband on who he should be for me and all of that, and that was my initiation into being a queen. Because how I think of a queen is somebody who's a leader and somebody who takes radical responsibility and owns the consequences of her choices. So when I began to do that, I began to take responsibility, take 100% responsibility for how I was showing up. In every interaction, when it's going sideways, I'm like, okay, what is this showing me? And it was hard. It was fucking hard. But it was the biggest gift of my life because I understood all my wounds, all the ways like I couldn't be with, when he would raise his voice, right? Or when I didn't feel supported, I would go into that little girl. But then I was able to heal that little girl and then be with anything that comes at me and be able to take the temperature from being like, take it down, create teamwork and solutions.
So let me ask you this. This is so good because I absolutely understand personally what you just described and feeling like I'm in a bottomless pit that I can never get out of. And exactly what you said for the sole reason of my emotional needs, right? My emotional needs are not being met here. The way I need this person to step up in my life, and he's not doing that. I'm just being burnt out. So what was it for you then at that time? Because you mentioned the choice to stay or to go. What was it for you that said, you know what, I'm going to choose the route of staying and really fixing this and starting with myself? What was that for you to not want to go in the other direction?
I think that for me, this is the other part, and thank you for asking this question because this is important. The part that supported me in choosing to stay is when my coach said to me, she said, when you choose, you're not choosing for the rest of your life. You're choosing today. And then you get to choose again, and then again, and again. And I make those micro choices every single day. There's no more 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It's like in this moment, we're here right now, I'm choosing you. And, I could choose something else next year. But because I chose moment to moment, day to day, week to week, right now, I cannot even imagine my life without him.
Wow.
Like I get upset when he's not taking care of his health because I'm like, I do not want to live life without you. I don't want you to go first, right?
Wow, there's so many questions are going through my mind. Because I hear that. I hear that desire to say, I'm going to choose. And I love that you said it's eating the elephant one bite at a time, right? You get up every day and you decide every day. And then at the end of the day, the next day you decide again. And I love that because I feel like those micro doses of making those decisions create a compound effect long term. But my question for you then is for those that are going through this and saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to step up. I want to choose him. I want to choose us. I want to do that. But your partner isn't necessarily on the same page. Was there like a conversation that you had to have with him to say, hey, this is what I'm doing? Or was there something like, I'm going to do this on my own and see if it causes some organic shifting in the relationship?
I think that for me, it was just me doing it on my own. And he seeing me embodying a different woman. Like he's seeing, like whenever we get into a disagreement, I would come back and I would repair. Right? I would take responsibility. I would dig really deep to be empathetic to him, right? And then come back and always come back to union and teamwork versus making him the bad guy, which is what I used to do. And then by me embodying that, he started noticing. He started taking notes. He started appreciating me more. And then he started to want to do the work with me.
Wow. And then how do you get somebody, your partner, inspire, I should say, your partner, because I hear that, right? And I know how powerful that is when you start to take ownership of self and you start with self. But there is still this thing that you need, right? How do you inspire your partner to really step into the things that you need. And what if you start to realize that as much as I need these things, this is not what they're necessarily capable of giving me? How do you navigate that?
Well, I would say, like, I would start with reflecting on that need that we have. What is it that we are needing from our partners? And is that something that we can start by giving it to ourselves? Like, is it more love? Is it more appreciation?
Love that.
Right? Because when we can fill our own cup, we just show up differently. There's not this like codependency, clinging, I need you to do this for me in order for me to feel whole, because that creates a lot of pressure on the other person. And so I would first, it's always an inside job. It always starts with us first. And then there's also this next level, which is what I get into with my clients. And that's about like taking ownership of emotional safety. So let's have a conversation on emotional safety. Because I think, one. Yes, because I think that this is something that as women is so important to us. And what we've been doing is relying and depending on our partners and demanding that they give us emotional safety. And when they don't, it's like, well, and I'm gonna raise my hand because I did this. Like, you're not a man. You can't be here for me the way I need you to. But coming on the other side of this and having more wisdom and understanding about me and about my husband and masculine and feminine dynamics, really what I want to empower women in understanding is that, like, in creating emotional safety, you have so much more power if you can take ownership of that. Because as the masculine leading energy, they lead with their minds. They're not, I mean, they, not to get into like a course on feminine and masculine dynamics, but, both of, like, every human being, we have feminine and masculine energy within us. With the feminine, with women, we primarily, if we're tapped in and we're being true to who we are, mostly we're leading with our feminine, and we also have our masculine. For men, when they're tapped in and they're feeling healthy and they're feeling strong, they're leading with their masculine, and they have some feminine, right? And so for men, they're leading with their masculine, their minds. It's not natural for them to understand how to hold space for us. And so for us to expect that of them is like insanity, because we're just setting them up to fail. But what we can do is take ownership of our emotional safety by learning how to communicate our needs in a way that our partners can hear us.
Right. That's key right there.
Yes.
In a way that our partners can hear us. And here, as you're saying these things, this is what's coming to me. Because I think about today's day and age and the gender neutrality, right? That women are going out there. When we talk about leading with the masculine mind, I have a natural tendency to lead with the masculine mind, even in my relationship. So that normal way of a woman, so to speak, to lead in her feminine space is not really how I am in my partnership, right? Because I even though my partner is very masculine, in our private space, I tend to be more the logic and he tends to be more the emotion in that space. But when we start to look at high achieving women, entrepreneurial women, just the gender neutrality that's starting to take place. 50 years ago, there was definitive lines as to roles that we played in households. And now those lines have become incredibly blurred, right? And so women, there's someone who just innately or naturally, or maybe from some sense of pathology, that they lead in that masculine space, and it creates friction and conflict. So how does a woman feel and learn her own safe space? Because I can tell you, again, for me personally, I don't need a man necessarily financially, right? I don't need the traditional things from a man, but I do need to feel emotionally stable. I need to feel some form of understanding, like he understands me when I'm being masculine. So how does someone navigate that when they're not leading the way you traditionally lead, if that makes sense? I don't know if that was a loaded question, but...
Yeah. There's so many things that we can, so many beautiful threads that we can pull from there. I would say that I was and still have a very strong masculine energy. I will say that there's an exploration. I invite every woman to explore this. Like, what actually fulfills them? Are you a hunter or are you a nurturer? For me, I thought I was a hunter. But when I did my inner work, I realized actually the life force energy that wants to flow through me is more leading with my feminine. I feel good when my husband takes care of the logic, the logistics. I used to do all of that. Like legit, we're doing a renovation right now, and the old me would have like supervised him, checked all the boxes, like make sure, sign off on all the decisions. And now I'm just like, you handle that. You know, I'm going to be here to advise, but I don't really want to have much to do with it other than the design. Because I just know that for me,
I love that.
For me, that's how I thrive. That's where I feel energized. So I think that it's an exploration for every woman to ask, like, what actually does fulfill her? Do you want to be taken care of? And I'm not saying that, you know, you sign off, you know, your sovereignty or anything, but do you want a relationship where you feel like you can relax? You don't have to be hunting all the time.
It's interesting you say that because I literally just posted something today about that, about alpha females. You know, people throw these words around, but how an alpha female takes charge when most of us, because I consider myself alpha, we don't really want to, right? We're just surviving. We're warriors all the time. And usually there's some pain points and there's some trauma or there's some, you know, pathology involved with that. And you know, it's like you want to lay down your sword. You want to be able to say, this is a space where I can take the armor off. Yeah. And it's difficult sometimes. Also, too, because if you know, when you get into relationships, there is that first phase where there's this kind of shield or this mask of who we really are. And sometimes, and I've noticed this with a lot of high achieving women, is men can be very attracted to very strong women in the beginning. And then it usually ends up being the thing that kind of pulls the relationship apart at some point. Because either she's directly or inadvertently emasculating her man, right? And then getting frustrated because she has an expectation for him to step up, but yet she doesn't give him the space to do that or the time to do that. So for people out there that are in that, what's the right approach really?
Well, I wouldn't say there's a right or wrong approach, but there's like tapping into what is it that you desire. Like you just honed in on something really key, right? Like you first, you know, you identify yourself as an alpha female, right? You get shit done, you make things happen, and you make money moves. Fabulous. But then you just tap into the deeper desires of your heart. Like you don't really want to do that, right? You want to have the option to do that, but you don't want to have to do it. And so when you get to the truth of your heart, that is when that's when you can begin to like look at the situation around you. Are you creating the environment for that to happen, for your partner to step up, or are you blocking him because you have a wounding that's telling you have to be in charge all the time? Because if you do that, he's going to become more feminine,
right? Or
he's going to become your competitor. And then that creates this dysfunction in a relationship.
So how does a woman then establish rebuilding trust, right? In terms of, okay, I'm going to surrender and I'm going to let my partner be the one to take charge and just, I'm going to tap into what I really want and I'm going to give him the space to be that man. And he drops the ball and then drops the ball again and then drops the ball again. And then that woman says, okay, now I have to do this. I have to take charge because if not, he's going to drop the ball. But and then that builds resentment and frustration and you disconnect and all of those things, right?
Yeah.
But let's say there's a valiant effort now at this point. We're 5-10 years into the relationship or whatever. And the man really wants, he's really ready. How does she rebuild that trust to say, I can take a step back? He's dropped the ball so many times. How do I really trust that he can take the lead here?
Yeah, that's a really beautiful. We're getting into like the nitty gritty of relationships here. Well, this is so good.
I'm asking selfishly, actually.
Well, it's not a one, you know, silver bullet.
All right.
But it is, it's communication skills. I call it ninja communication. This is what I teach in my course. Because you got to know how to delicately slice through your ego, his ego, to get through to the heart of the matter. And nervous system regulation. So, for example, you know, when you want to trust your partner, you're ready to trust, but you're not sure if you can trust. He's demonstrated, or he's let you down before, okay? And you feel resentment. You feel like you brought it up before, you're nagging him. You don't want to do that. It sucks. What's missing is communication skills and the ability to navigate your emotions, your nervous system, so that you're not coming at him, right? So that you can still see the path through the forest. Because when I see that, when I hear that, and I've personally been there, what's happening inside a woman's body is that there's hurt and there's pain. And when we can't express it, that creates this heaviness in their energy. You don't even want to look at him in the eyes, right? But it's very disempowering, because there are ways that you can express how you feel in a way that inspires him to listen. So, for example, if he doesn't follow through and you say to him, "Oh, there you go again," of course he's going to get defensive. He's going to want to have nothing to do with this conversation. He's like, "I'm out," right?
Right.
But if you say, like, "I feel hurt right now," you're not saying, "You hurt me." You're saying, "I feel hurt." You're taking ownership. That's like a wake-up call for him.
Hopefully.
Eventually.
Yeah.
I stand by eventually it is. Not at first, because you're still rebuilding trust.
Gotcha.
Right? But eventually, I feel hurt. I feel scared. Not, "You're scaring me. You're making me angry, da-da-da." Like, if anybody said that to me, I would get defensive right away. So there's a lot of like common sense in this too.
It's like disarming.
Yeah.
It's being able to have a conversation where you're disarming your partner.
Yes.
Yeah.
By taking responsibility.
Yeah.
Right? And so you, by expressing your feelings, you start to move the energy out of your body. And you say it in a safe way where he's not running away from the conversation. And then,
That's the key, yeah.
And then you also, and so I'm going to share my 3-step framework on boundaries, because I think that what we're talking about here is boundaries. Boundaries and desires, they're the same thing. When let's say you have a desire that he follows through, that he said he was going to, go to the grocery store to pick up a few eggplants, and you're getting all, everything is ready, but the eggplants didn't come home. He forgot, right? You want to kill him. You got a family to feed.
You remind me of a scene from The Breakup.
Oh, yes, the lemons.
The lemons.
Oh, I've had conversations about lemons with my husband.
Got 3 lemons. He's like, baby got him 3 lemons. She wanted a whole thing for our centerpiece. Yeah, but I'm sorry, I interrupted you. But.
No. I literally am like flashing back to,
but
like, I had a lemon argue with my husband too.
As trivial as it is, these little types of glitches like that, they're bigger. They're small, trivial things, but they're usually a good indicator of how the communication is going amongst two people, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you get into the very granular, and this is the shit that matters.
Okay, yeah.
This is the shit that matters in a relationship. So then, you're frustrated, right? But instead, like, what you can do is like you raise your self-awareness, because what you don't want to do is roll your eyes and be like, here you go again, energy. I can't trust you, energy, right? Because that just leads to conflict. So you get to express how you feel. This is how I'd like to empower women. You get to, step 1, just express how you feel, but you have to do it in a responsible way.
Love that.
I feel hurt right now, or I feel frustrated. And then step 2 is you don't make them a bad guy. Like, I call it, so step 1 is I feel.
Okay.
Step 2 is I see. What is his greater intention behind maybe he forgot, right? But he didn't mean to forget. And maybe he has a habit of forgetting, but what is his greater intention, or what's the benefit of the doubt that you can give him? Maybe I see that you're really busy at work. I see that you're really preoccupied. And then step 3 is I request. Can you, in the future, get the eggplants? Or call me if there's a problem. Or let's talk about how can I support you in remembering? Do you see how there's teamwork? There's not like, a blaming, you're the bad guy, I'm the victim situation.
Yeah.
And that's what rebuilds trust, one conversation at a time.
I think that's really key what you just said there, because I think that even for me, again, as you're saying things, I'm reflecting on all of these type of setbacks, and at some point, getting to a point in the relationship where it doesn't even feel like a partnership anymore. It's like, I'm here, you're here, we're practically just roommates, best buds at best. But even like I've said, if my emotional needs, and I've said this many times, if my emotional needs feel that they're not being met, or I feel very drained in the relationship, it romantically and intimately affects the relationship, But yeah, that partnership and understanding that partnership. So I'm gonna be a little bit of devil's advocate here. Because as you're saying those things, and they're so powerful, and I know how effective they are, but there are some women that would be listening to this and saying, I'm so over it. I'm tired of having to be the teacher. I'm tired of having to be the bigger person. I'm tired of being the one that initiates stepping up. You know, I'm frustrated. He should do something about it. And I don't want to be the nice person in the approach. What do you say to women who have that attitude because they're at the edge of the sidewalk, so to speak?
I say that you haven't tapped into your magic and power.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's inside her, that version of you that can, like, she's magic. Like, she can shift the energy just like that. When you get a taste of her, you're like, oh, I get it. I get it.
Love that.
Yeah.
What was it for you? I know you said you were talking to your coach and she told you about the decision, or he or she, I don't remember.
She. Yeah.
And the decision, and you said, I'm deciding to choose us and your marriage. What was it for you in this, as you went through the steps where it was like, oh, this is working? And when did you finally see that he started to turn around along with you to kind of reignite the flame that you guys had?
That's a really great question. No one has asked me this before. And I'm like, oh, there's so many things that are coming up. I think that it's really important to remember that physical intimacy is so important in a marriage. And at first I was frustrated. It was definitely not a linear path. There were moments after that I'm like on my knees crying, like praying to God, like, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot keep taking responsibility. But I kept choosing.
Every day. Yeah, I love
every
that.
day. And it just slowly things began to just like trend upwards. But I will say, like, there was at first we plateaued because it was too much like talking things through, when really so much of that can be dissolved with just giving each other a hug. You know, with greeting him. So what I started thinking about our relationship as having its own subconscious mind, its own patterns, its own way of its own like emotions and temperature. So, for example, we all have a subconscious mind,
right?
And so, in order, like, I know that my natural state is to be very self-doubtful, to be very self-critical. So I got to do things and I change the patterns in my brain to be confident in myself, to show up right here, having this conversation with you. And so it's this, when you think about a relationship as having its own subconscious mind and that it's your job to change the consciousness of it, you start recognizing, okay, my relationship right now feels very transactional. There's not a lot of warmth. What patterns can I start to apply to my relationship to bring more warmth and tenderness? As somebody who, again, was very leading with her mind, you know, a lot of alpha energy, I looked at this and I was like, okay, my husband and I are both very logical people. And so no wonder our relationship didn't feel warm. So then I said, okay, what can I do? I need to actually create an alarm on my phone and instill hug time between us.
Interesting.
I think we started 3 times a day. When the alarm goes off, we're giving each other a hug, right? And then we would start laughing, and then over time it became really intimate and really juicy, where we would start breathing together.
Oh, I love
and
that.
we start really connecting. And when you can connect in a physical and an energetic way, like, the small shit just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And that connection too isn't just about, like, let's say sex, right? Because I've known, again, when the relationship was going through a downside and just having physical human needs, and you're, you know, having sex and you're being intimate, but there's no connection there. It's just a physical act to satisfy an urge at the moment.
Let's get off.
Yeah, exactly. And getting almost in a routine with that.
Yes.
My question now, because you mentioned patterns, and this is one thing that I'm big on my coaching, is pattern recognition. And it's very, very important. How important is that first to do pattern recognition in your relationship? Because there are very specific, if you really pay attention, like even in my relationship, really paying attention to, it's literally to the day, sometimes the month, every year. This is the month when everything starts acting up. It's like there's some muscle memory with past pain, if you've had enough years, where it starts to creep in and you're not even realizing that it's happened. So do you, when you talk to your couples, do you talk to them about first recognizing their patterns in order to interrupt those patterns?
So I actually work with women only.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't work with couples because my philosophy is that I'm here to empower you to unlock your power and magic.
I love
You don't need your
that.
husband to do the work with you. When you embody the changes that you want to see in your marriage, your husband will step up in his own way.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And is there ever a time when you're like, when you've talked to your clients, where there is a conclusion in her work that she realizes that the relationship does need to dissolve? Are there times with that, or does it usually have a better outcome?
Yeah, so the women that come to me, they want to make their marriage work.
Okay.
So that's where I thrive. So that's how I can support you. If you want to make for me, the way I think about it is like, if you're committed to something, you can't fail.
I love that.
Right.
I love that you said that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, when most of my clients thrive, like I have clients who come to me where at the beginning they're in the brink of divorce, but she wants to make it work. And then by the end of it, she's like, oh, we're getting along so well. I love him so much. We're starting a business together. I want you guys to imagine like loving your partner so much and communicating so well, working so well as a team that you would actually want to start a business together.
And think you could get along, because that is a very hard feat.
Yes.
Going into business with your partner can be very, very difficult if your communication skills are terrible.
Right. But she learned, and they learned ninja communication skills to navigate like sticky situations, right?
I love it.
But the clients that you some clients grow a little slower,
Okay.
right? And that when that happens, it's more about them not being ready yet to really like go all in and take radical responsibility, right? But once they do, it's like, the sky's the limit.
It's just kind of like taking a breath, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, again, and I'm going to go back to relating to women who have my personality type, you get so almost prideful and set in your ways because you feel like if you stand your ground, that you're protecting yourself from being hurt anymore. And there is something scary about being vulnerable and being the one to take charge and being inward and saying, I've got to soften up here. I've got to find a different way. And it's hard to do that. It's scary to do that when you felt so much disappointment, Totally.
I totally can relate to that. The thing is that it's always pointing to a wound inside of us. Yeah. It's always an invitation. I remember for me, I had this wound of what do you call it? Rejection. So when I didn't feel supported by my husband, I would feel totally rejected. Like he didn't love me, he doesn't respect me, and it became like a bomb in our relationship. So if he didn't look at me the right way, if he didn't nurture, if he didn't love on me the way I wanted him to love on me, then my nervous system would go,
You'd have
would
a visceral
collapse.
response.
Yeah. And so there was no conversation. I couldn't actually share with him what I wanted in a way that he could listen, because I would just be nagging him or complaining. But so that was my work to work on my fear of rejection. And when I did that and showed up in a relationship where, maybe he didn't show up perfectly, I can have a conversation with him about how I felt and what I needed from him without making him the bad guy. And he began to show up.
That's so powerful. It's powerful because, again, it's that inward thing of knowing what triggers are. Like, I can tell you that my biggest trigger is being misunderstood. I feel like I feel like I'm tooting my own horn here, but I feel like I'm a really good communicator. I will always share with, you'll never be wondering what's wrong with me. Now, is my method of delivery always the best? No, especially if I'm frustrated. But I know that that's something, and I've always wondered to myself, my biggest frustration is like, how can I get my partner? What method? How am I going to get them to just understand me, to let me be? I don't know how else to get them to understand me.
I got you. You ready for this?
Let's hear it. I need it.
So first of all, two-prong approach on this. One is it's showing you something. Like I used to have that like need to be understood too. Because, I saw myself as this type of person and I have good intentions and I want people to see that too. But when you have that need for people to see that, you just gave your power away.
Love that.
So I had to do my work to releasing it. If this is me, and it's ongoing work, by the way, it's not like it's one and done, but like this is me. And if, if something I'm saying, like we're on Instagram, we're putting our thoughts out there.
Right.
People are disagreeing with us all the time. At first, I used to get really defensive. I'm like, how can you not see this? And I would judge the commenter. But now it doesn't bother me anymore because I've released my need to be understood. So that's one. And then two is like ninja communication skills. There are rituals that you can create in your marriage so that you are seen in the way that you want to be seen.
Interesting.
And so my husband and I, what we do is each night we acknowledge each other for at least 3 things. And so it would start by sharing with my husband, what I see in him, what am I celebrating him for? Like, thank you so much for working so hard for us. Or I saw how you led your team. You're such an amazing leader. And then I would ask him, what would you like to be acknowledged for? And then he tells me some things that I don't even see.
Interesting.
Right? Like the way that he handled the renovation, the way that he's working so hard. I mean, I see that, but I'm just giving an example.
Yeah.
And so then I would mirror that back to him so that he feels seen. And I would ask him, is there anything else? So that he feels like fully seen. And then he does the same thing to me. And if there's anything that I feel like is missing, where I want to be seen for, like my devotion to helping women, because sometimes he's not very connected to that.
Right.
So I say to him that this is what I'd like to be acknowledged for. And he's like, okay. So I just gave him the codes. I set him up to win. And you do that enough times and it just becomes natural and normal in your relationship.
That's
and you
good.
Consistently feel seen.
I'm glad you said that because for some people, again, like they're so used to their way or the flow of their relationship to do these rituals. I can see how some people, it feels corny. I don't feel like asking these questions. Oh my God. Do we really have to do this? It doesn't seem organic. It doesn't seem natural. But I'm glad you said that because I think that when we really have a compelling why, when it's important for us, you got to try the things you're not used to. And you have to be consistent with that. If you're saying I'm really ready to put all in, then getting comfortable with the things that seem uncomfortable, just to like surrender a little bit and open up your heart space a little bit,
Yeah, that.
Yeah. So I've got some other questions on here. I'm gonna make sure I'm keeping an eye on the time here. Why do entrepreneur women resent their husband? So that was one of the topics we talked about discussing. And so the question is, in your experience, why do many women entrepreneurs who are actively working on personal professional growth often feel resentment towards their husbands?
Yeah, because we've been doing all of this work, we've been growing, and we have this big vision for our life. And if our partner is not growing at the pace we're growing, or growing at all, they're a liability to our vision in our life, right? And so I think, though, that it's really beautiful anytime anyone is doing the inner work. I mean, it's so healing for ourselves and for the world. And then there's this next level, which is where I got caught up in. I didn't realize there was this next level. What I was doing when I was starting to do the inner work and understanding law of attraction and manifesting and thinking positive thoughts only, I started to disown the parts of me that I didn't like, parts of me that were lazy and selfish. So whenever I see those parts play out in my husband, parts that were lazy and selfish, he's sitting in front of the TV, right? Or he's not following through, I rejected him.
That's
rejected
powerful
him.
What you just said, yeah.
Yeah. And so of course that's going to cause disharmony and resentment in a relationship. So how I moved through this, and I didn't realize, I had no idea this was going to happen, but I basically started bringing those parts back home to be allowing myself to be selfish and understanding that there's a role. It's a protector part of us. There's a role that it plays. It helps me set boundaries. Also, there was the thing for my relationship that caused us a lot of turmoil is I always saw myself as a great communicator, never would get angry, right? Could always be compassionate. But I suppressed the part of me that would get angry. And then I would be resentful of other people because I didn't set boundaries.
God, this is so good.
And
what you're
so wait, when
saying.
my husband,
Yeah.
his I don't want to say his natural state, but he is more apt to get angry about the small stuff than I do. So instead of having compassion for that, I would emasculate him.
Mm.
If you were a man, you would know how to control your emotions like I am, the work that I'm doing.
God, this
Right?
is so good what you're saying. And I'm going to kind of like say it again in the way I'm interpreting, way it's downloading to me, because this is so good. This is so, so good. Because I see this, I've done this, where you do so much work that you feel you need to detach yourself from what you think is wrong with you. And then you become self-righteous in that and judgmental.
Totally.
And that is so key. And it's like a light bulb for me even. Because then what happens is you're looking at yourself like, I've done this work. I've detached myself from this. And yet you're not doing it. And there's so much judgment from that. And so what you said was so beautiful. There's a part of you that doesn't need to completely detach from things that you're saying is wrong with you. It's a matter of saying, okay, these are things that are a part of me. And what makes it wrong is when I use it fear-based. But what are the things that I can selfishly do in a space of love? Even when you use the example of selfish versus am I being selfish out of fear? But the selfish part of me is required for me to establish healthy boundaries. And I love that you said that, because I think a lot of people, whether you're a man or woman, we make that mistake, especially when our growth journey in our mind is far more advanced than our partners.
Yeah.
You know, and that right there, I feel like that was such an important thing that you just said.
Yeah.
That was so good.
Thank you. Another thing that I want to bring awareness into this part of the conversation is that what you're really doing is coming home to yourself and having so much compassion for yourself. Compassion for all those parts that you're like, no, that part is useless. That part caused me problems and turmoil before. No, babe, like bring that home to yourself. All parts of you are whole, perfect, and complete. And when you can love all of those parts of you, you can love those parts in your partner.
I freaking love that, because it's true. Because when you start detaching, I had a conversation not long ago with someone about detaching. What is the limiting belief that you're creating those subconsciously, right? When you're telling me these things about me, I need to detach them because they're wrong. You're essentially telling yourself that there's parts of you that are wrong, that are flawed. And it becomes a cue that tells you you're not enough. And when you start posing judgment on someone else, it's your fear that of your own rejection, actually, right?
Exactly.
It's very interesting. This is like a total, like my light bulb. If there was like a little meme, ding, it would be like going off.
There's
right
so
now.
much good stuff here. I mean, I could go on for days.
I love it.
But like ultimately, what I think is really like the thing that we all want is love in a relationship.
Yeah.
And this is the keys to love and compassion in your relationship. When you can accept yourself fully for who you are, you can accept your husband too. And that does not mean that you have to tolerate toxic behaviors, but it does mean that you come from a place of love. And from that place, you can create change. You can make behavior requests, hold him accountable in a way where he leans in and he's inspired instead of feeling like there's something wrong with him and you're trying to change him, because that doesn't work.
Right.
I've tried.
Yeah. This is a good segue, because you mentioned toxic. When you are being inward and you're like, I want this relationship to work. I love this person with all my heart and soul, and then we're just at a bad space. How does one then really, how am I trying to ask this question? Because you have certain relationships where the significant other is a very toxic person, right? And you could almost be over accountable to self and trying to do the work, hoping that they'll be inspired to do better. How does one then recognize in themselves to say, okay, I'm doing the work and this person's still toxic? How long do they have to try, I guess, to inspire before they say this is just toxic?
Oh, so many things to say from there.
It's a loaded question, I know.
No, it's so good. It's so good. I'm going to share something that most people are not going to like to hear. That is that if I looked at my relationship in the past, I would have looked at it as toxic. Okay. I would have blamed my husband for being toxic. But now that I look at it, maybe I was being toxic. So let's I don't even really like that word.
Yeah.
Because they're all like adaptations, behavior
Yeah.
adaptations from our own
And
pain.
there's also a lot of participation. We always think of toxic relationships as though we got one villain and one victim. It's like, nah, this is interchangeable here.
You're part of it too,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
when we can take ownership for our part in it, we can start creating change. And then as far as like how do you know, like how long do you stay
Yeah.
in it? Like what if he's not inspired? There's so much I could say about that, but for now, I think that's why it's really important for women to build their masculine and feminine core,
Yeah.
so that you can have discernment for
Yes.
understanding when a situation you gotta go, where it's just like not he really doesn't have the capacity to step up, and you can be with that with love and say, you know what, it's not for me, and then you can go, or you can say, you know what, I accept this. I accept who he is. I'm going to accept that he's not going to be able to be this type of a person. So, for example, my husband, right? I'm very spiritual, and he's not. Right? He's very, he's very logical. Everything he needs to see facts and data, right? Before, I used to look down on him for not praying, for not, being aware of energy. But I've just kind of accepted him for who he is. And because I accepted him, he's now like showing interest.
Interesting.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
he's not the type to meditate. I used to encourage him, try to change him by like inviting him to meditate, but really say like, you should do this, right? And he's like, no, it's not for me. And I've just come to a point where I'm like, that's just not who he is. So he's going to grow in his own way. And I have to let go of my ego and trying to make him into the person I think that he should be, because there's a plan for him. And all I got to do is create the best environment for him to grow in however that looks for him.
Right.
And so that is another part of the equation too. But now, if you're in a dynamic where you're like, you know what, my soul is telling me that I need to be with somebody who's spiritual, who's doing the work, then you have every right to make that choice. Right. But just know that you have choices. It's not just like, I can't, I got to go. You can't. You know what I mean?
I love that. And I think too that, again, your superpower is so much with your awareness and self-awareness and self-love. And I think when you start to really tap into self and you're willing to do the work, not just for yourself, but in partnerships with people, your partner or people outside of that, you get clarity in that. And like you said, that discernment, you really, truly get a lot of clarity as to what you need to do, what's the right thing to do, not just for you, but for your partner too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're in an environment or you're in a relationship that maybe it started off as a trauma bond. Maybe there was some issues that connected you guys, but both of you are growing because you've spent time in the relationship. Obviously, if the relationship's abusive and bad, you get out, right? You don't want to be in an abusive relationship saying, I'm going to work on myself and so you can stop beating me. You have to take those kind of things very seriously.
Sure.
My last question, though, is as you speak to these women and they're like, you tap into self, do the work, try these things, create these rituals. And again, I might have even already said it. For some women, they're going to be like, I need him to do that for me. I don't want to be the one. I would love for him to take charge in that. What would you say to her if she said that? She's talking to you, you're coaching her, and she's like, I'm tired. I don't want to step it up. I did that years ago, and we just went back to old stuff or whatever. I need it to be his turn. How would you encourage her to keep it going?
Well, you make requests.
I love that.
You just make requests in a way, and that's your work, to be able to express yourself in a way that he can hear you.
Yeah.
He will step up once he feels respected and once he feels seen. He wants. I'm gonna tell you guys, like, the truth is, nothing makes your man more happy than making you happy. When you're happy, he feels successful. He's like, he's winning in life. You just have to get your ego out of the way and learn how to communicate with him in a way that opens his heart, where he's like, let me move mountains and let me move heaven and earth for you.
That's
right.
So
and
true.
That's your work, because that's the magic that we have. We just haven't been taught in society that we have magic. Everything needs to be like controlled and structured, but there's this whole energy underneath that every woman has that that wants to be unlocked and unleashed. And when you do that, it's like you're just not afraid of these sticky situations anymore. You just realize how much power you have, and you just have better discernment.
It's inspiring because at the end of the day, regardless of outcome, right? You can hope for the best and be very proactive and really take charge and take ownership and do the work. And the relationship could still fall apart because the person, your partner, just doesn't step up or see your efforts or even respond to your efforts. But it will never be wasted.
Yes.
Right?
Correct.
That work that he or she chooses to do is so powerful for themselves because it'll transfer into every other aspect of their life.
Yes.
The way you communicate in business, the way you communicate with your friends, the way you communicate with your family. It's so transferable. And so it's just worth it to do it regardless of outcome. You know?
Like I have clients, and this is the best part of my job, when my clients tell me that they've noticed that their children are now more patient and empathetic because they're noticing the changes in the way that they're interacting with their partners.
I love that.
Yeah.
Man, I swear we need to do like a 3-part, 4-part series because there's so many questions I have.
I'm here for it.
How do you want to leave the audience? What would you say as some closing thoughts to, let me frame it for you. You've got a woman who's been in partnership for 10 years. She's feeling burnt out. She's feeling rejected. She's feeling overwhelmed. She loves him. She has compassion for him, but she's angry with him. And she's not sure what she needs to do next. What would be a starting point or something that comes to mind that you would share with her right out the gate as we close?
First of all, I wish she was in front of me so I can give her a big hug. And I would say that it first starts with a choice. You know, I've been in a place where like I wanted to, I actually broke off our engagement, you know, like 17 years ago. So I know what it's like. And it starts with a choice, because without making the choice, you're just not going to get anywhere. You're just like in limbo. You're not going to recognize and realize your power until you make that choice. Because when you do, whether it's to stay or to leave, when you do, you call in the resources to support you, because you can't do this alone. Let's be honest, healthy marriages and communication, who taught us that?
Right.
Nobody. But yet, here's the thing, that we're expected to be good at both. And when we're not, we feel all this shame and we can't talk about it with anyone, even though we were never taught these skills. And so for any women feeling bad about themselves, like just know that, like, please just give yourself so much compassion, because you are not taught these skills. And at the same time, you can learn these skills now.
I love that. Beautifully beautiful. Thank you so much for being here and sharing so much words of wisdom. It has helped me. You've given me some serious things to think about. And so,
Good. I'm so glad.
I hope it does the same for everyone out there. So ladies, if you are in this situation, if this resonated with you, I will leave all of her contact information, Julie's contact information below. And again, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, but get in touch with Julie if this is something that resonates with you and you just need that guidance. And until next time, ciao.